Hello, I'm John Drew, producer of The Chronic Rift. For the past year and a half, we've had the pleasure of bringing to you some of the top names in science fiction, fantasy, and comic art. People such as Ben Bova, Ellen Datlow, Jody Lynn Nye, Gary Gygax, P.M. Griffin, Peter David, Wendy Pini, and a whole lot more. We're not finished yet. Our upcoming holiday episode will feature an interview with fantasy writer Marion Zimmer Bradley. Upcoming episodes will deal with such topics as the fantasy of Shakespeare, the television works of Kenneth Johnson, and European comics. Now, in the last few weeks, Andrea and Keith have been telling you about a grab bag contest. I'm going to be honest with you, the response has not been all that great. It's very simple. Just send in your name, address, and an optional evening phone number on a postcard to us here. First prize is anything we can get our hands on, and as you can see, that's quite a lot. But we're not done yet. Now for some further honesty. This contest is a way for us to gauge our audience. We know you're out there. We've spoken to you at conventions, on the phone, through the mail, and even here at the studio. We need to know, though, if you're still watching. I'm here today, breaking my vow never to appear on the show again, to ask you to send in your postcards. Let us know you watch the show. If you don't want to enter the contest, just say so. But if you want to, make sure you get your card in by December 6th, 1991. But please send your postcard to The Chronic Rift, P.O. Box 2224, New York, New York, 10185, 0023.
Hi, I'm Keith DeCandido.
And I'm Celeste Totaling Lyons. Andrea Lipinski's off tonight.
And we're back on The Chronic Rift. They say fantasy and science fiction is supposed to reflect humanity. And, well, humanity has always had a proclivity for making war, so it's not surprising that a very big subgenre of FNSF is war. And since we leave no subgenre unturned here on The Chronic Rift tonight, on our roundtable discussion we will be talking about war in fantasy and science fiction. That's in a little while.
Yes.
I'm jumping straight into the comic in review this week because it is such an important comic in review. It is Mouse, A Survivor's Tale 2, and Here My Troubles Began by Art Spiegelman. This is a sequel to Mouse, A Survivor's Tale 1, My Father Bleeds History, which was published by Pantheon in 1987 and was probably the most acclaimed comic book in the field's history. The second volume is the second half of the story that was started in the first volume, appropriately enough. The first volume had two narratives going on. The first was Artie Spiegelman and his father Wladek in 1979. Wladek is a Polish Jew who survived the Nazi concentration camps in World War II. Artie is trying to get the story of that experience to put into a comic book. This is compelling for the character study. Wladek is miserly, crotchety, abrasive, frustrating, and very adept at imparting guilt on his son. Artie and the reader are both torn between sympathy for what he went through, which that experience partly formed the old man he became, and complete annoyance at what an ass the man can be.
Hi, I'm the Man in Black, and this is the video report. Recently available in comic book stores is Clutch Cargo Volume 2 and Zillion the Burning. The Burning is a special episode that takes place after the Nose of War storyline currently being released. Coming soon from Streamline, Space Angel Volume 2 and Colonel Bleep Volume 2. Later this year, or possibly early next, Twilight of the Cockroaches and the Lensman movie.
With me and Celeste to discuss the wild and woolly world of war, say that 10 times fast, are, over on the right next to Celeste, Jim Bain, founder, editor-in-chief, and publisher of Bain Books, one of the largest publishers of military SF. Over on my left is S.N. Lewitt, author of such books as Dancing Back and Cyber Stealth. And remotely by phone, we have Mr. David Drake, author of such books as Surface Action and Ranks of Bronze.
Hi.
Hello. Here we all are.
I'm definitely a science fiction writer who sometimes uses war as a tool. There's no question whatsoever.
How about you, David?
I'm a science fiction writer. I was a science fiction writer before I was drafted out of law school back in 1969. When I got back, I began writing science fiction, which in some cases was science fiction about war. But I started out writing science fiction and fantasy, and, that's what I'm doing. I have no desire to write straight military fiction or nonfiction, for that matter.
You don't see a lot of fiction with massed armies as a backdrop. It tends to be rather more up close and personal now. It's still reflecting Vietnam as the Vietnam generation fades. Sorry about that, Dave. I think you were finding a lot more. Well, glorification isn't quite the word for it, but a lot more people having fun at it because they missed out on the real thing. Our experience in the Gulf will only intensify that.
We seem to have an entire generation of people who have not really lived through a war. I know so few people who have actually been part of it or been drafted or whatever. So that's got to affect our view of it too.
Well, a lot more people now than 20 years ago are under the impression that war can be fun. They take the Gulf exercise as their lesson, except that it should be clear to everyone that this was not a war. This was a live fire exercise in which the other side did not shoot back. Not a war. David, particularly, I think, is bothered by this because, contrary to what you might think, he specializes in a sort of anti-war fiction.
I would like to say, as one of the generation who has not fought in a war, and also being of a gender that until recently was not involved in the front lines, that I still feel very strongly about what David says. I tend to write anti-killing books, I think, but also about war as I know it, which is as a Washingtonian who has had certain ties to the political and terrorist and anti-terrorist community, especially the Arab world, and some experiences with another form of, say, urban guerrilla warfare, which is frequently undeclared war, but certainly has been raging in our airports for several decades.
Next week, we're going to be talking about Isaac Asimov. We were going to have Isaac Asimov's wife on. We're going to have a couple of other people, including Martin Greenberg. We'll also have Orenthal Hawkins and his couch potato salad. And thank you.
Andrea will be back.
And Andrea will be back. Thank you also, this wonderful person, for filling in here. And I'll see you next week. She'll see you later.
I'll watch.
Right.
I'll be one of you.
Good night.
Good night.
This episode was sponsored in part by Comics Interview, the magazine where both the fans and the pros turn to see who's who and how it's done. Read Comics Interview number 100 and see who the 100 most powerful people in the comics industry are. For a free catalog, write to Comics Interview, 234 Fifth Avenue, Suite 301, New York, New York, 10001. The Omega Zone, a store specializing in comic books and video movie rentals, including science fiction, horror, animation, and cult films you won't find at your local video store. Now at a new location, 258 West 15th Street, between 7th and 8th Avenues in Manhattan. Telephone 212-645-6941. Daw Books Incorporated, publishers of high-quality fantasy, science fiction, and horror since 1971. For a free catalog, write to Daw Books Incorporated, 375 Hudson Street, Department T, New York, New York, 10014. Applause Books, publishers of the newly released Terminator 2 Judgment Day movie book, written by T2 director James Cameron and William Wisher. It contains over 700 photos from the film. You can learn more about the movie and see scenes that were cut from the film. You can find T2 Judgment Day at area bookstores or call Applause Books at 212-496-7511. Aboriginal Science Fiction, the monthly magazine of science fiction and nonfiction, available at area specialty shops. For subscription information, write to Aboriginal Science Fiction, P.O. Box 2449, Woburn, Massachusetts, 01888. 8. Worlds of Wonder, fantasy and science fiction artworks, featuring painting and sculpture by some of the best artists in the field, including Dean Morrissey, James Warhola, Wendy Ross, David Mattingly, J.K. Potter, and many others. For information about this and Worlds of Wonder's new art gallery, write to Worlds of Wonder, 3421 M Street, Northwest, Suite 327, Washington, D.C. 20007, or call 202-298-7889 and ask for Jane Frank. Tor Books, a publisher of fantasy, science fiction, mystery, and horror books available at your local bookstore, including the New York Times bestseller The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan, and After the King, a book celebrating the 100th anniversary of the birth of J.R.R. Tolkien, including all news stories by Stephen R. Donaldson, Peter S. Beagle, and others. Both books on sale now. Publisher of David Drake's Hammer Slimer series. Publisher of Jerry Pournelle's Falkenberg's Legion Future History. Publisher of Lois McMaster Bujold's Hugo Award-winning Miles Vorkosian series. Publisher of Elizabeth Moon's Deed of Paxenarian. The publisher of military SF and fantasy. Bane Books. We take military SF seriously. Not that we're stuffy about it. Omni Magazine is proud to be a sponsor of the Chronic Rift. Pick up the latest issue of Omni at your local newsstand or call 1-800-289-6664 for subscription information.